Ghost story in prison. So, I have had several supernatural experiences and figured I would share some that have stood out. I worked as an officer at a prison, and although I have moved on to a new facility, I have been an officer for the past 12 years. One of the major skills I have learned is how to retain and recall details, which helps recount events I witness. This makes report writing much easier and is helping me recount these events here. The prison I worked at was the oldest operational in my state. It was built in the 1870s in an old style with a big brick wall that runs the prison's perimeter. The place has been updated over the years, but some areas that still operated had little done to them since it was built. When I started, the old heads told all of us that the place was haunted, given everyone who had died over the years. Different places more than others, like the old unit that was a segregation, or what some people might know as the hole, with all the prison graffiti. I never gave it much thought, because if I do not experience it, then it is just a cool story but not confirmed. First experience. I worked there for 8 months when I first saw something strange. I was working overtime at night on what's called a one-on-one, where you have to watch a prisoner who is feeling suicidal and make sure he doesn't kill himself. It meant that I needed to stay up all night and check to make sure the prisoner was breathing every 15 minutes. And I had a partner who walked by every 28 minutes, so I knew I was awake. It was about 2 a.m., and I had just used my flashlight to illuminate the cell of the prisoner I was watching and confirmed that he was breathing. I looked down to mark the check on my clipboard, and I saw movement out of the corner of my eyes. My partner had just done his round 15 minutes prior, and all the prisoners were supposed to be locked in their cells, so there shouldn't be any movement down there. I turn and see someone doing a round on the housing unit. He isn't right. This guy is wearing a blue uniform with a Breton cap, shiny black leather belt, and has a baton in his hand. The problem is that these uniforms haven't been used by my department since the 1950s. And our uniforms are not blue, they are gray and modern, whereas this one was old. I watched this guy walk down the unit for maybe 5 seconds, and then I shook my head and slapped my face to make sure I was awake. When I looked back, there was not anyone there. Second experience. This one happened roughly 2 years later during my normal shift. The central building of the prison I worked in is a big room called a rotunda. It has 2 floors, but is open, so you can see the balcony up on the top levels, and anyone who is leaving the rotunda can be seen from the opposite side, even on the balcony. The doors into the wings that branch off of the balcony all have windows, and most of the rooms directly connected have windows also. It was maybe 2100, and I was going to the rotunda to complete some paperwork with a coworker for my sergeant, which is common. As we were opening the open barred gate to go into the rotunda, I looked up and noticed that the administrative wing lights appeared to be dimmed through the window in the door. I commented to my coworker that we would need to report that a light was out in the administrative wing. It was then, as we were both looking at the window, that we observed something move in the window, and we realized that this was not a light malfunction. A shadow person was standing in front of the window. While we were watching this shadow move to its left and through a solid wall into another room, we saw its silhouette through the window of that room. We just looked at each other and kept going. Third experience. I was about 3 years in as an officer by the point this one happened. I was working the 3rd shift in the control center, which is where we use the cameras and security measures. Also, there are several rifle posts around the prison's perimeter that are used to ensure the security of the prison. But we only ever use 3 of them during operational hours. In this case, it's important you know that when a phone is left off the hook, the phone rings into the control center so that we can address the issue. When the call rings through, you can pick up the phone and hear anything on the other end that may be being said in the area, which is important in case we are dealing with a staff assault or a hostage situation. So, I am working as the electronic monitoring officer. which means the camera controls are my main responsibility, along with the perimeter security. As I'm working, the phone rings, and the institutional caller ID says 1 post, which is odd, because that post is not used because it's too small for a modern person to comfortably fit inside it. Also, at this time, there's nobody that should be near it. And for someone to reach it would have set off at least 2 security alarms, which I was in charge of monitoring. Given the fact that the guy who was doing the perimeter checks was a bit of a prankster, I figured it was just him playing a prank and that he knew a way around the sensors. So, I answer the phone and all I hear is static, just continuously increasing and decreasing in volume, like someone has an old television on a static-filled channel and is moving the volume up and down constantly. I hang up the phone and move the camera to look at the post, and I can see right inside, there's not anyone there. As I am looking at it, the phone rings again as an off the hook at 1 post. This time, my lieutenant picks up the phone, and after a minute walks back to me, asking if the perimeter officer is playing games because he can hear mumbling blurred out by static from the 1 post phone. He sees that I have the camera pointed right at it and that there is no one there. The lieutenant tells me to have the perimeter officer check it because an animal may have gotten in the post and knocked the phone off the hook. The officer took a while to get there as he had been on the other side of the perimeter and he had to climb 5 flights of stairs to get there. During this time, the phone has continued to ring from 1 post until I can see the officer opening the door, at which point, phone stops ringing. The officer opens the door with his flashlight on and calls over the radio that there is not a phone in the post. My lieutenant responds that there must be one because the calls keep coming through. In response, the officer holds up a disconnected phone line so that the camera can see it and says that that is the only thing in the post. This post has not been used since the early 80s. Like I said, it was too small of a space. The phone woo. This post has not been used since the early 80s. Like I said, it was too small of a space. The phone would still ring now and again on the 3rd shift until we updated our phone system to an internet-based system. 4th experience. I had been an officer for about 4 years at this point. I was working my regular shift as the electronic monitoring officer. I went on a restroom break, which means I had to leave my post and go about 100 yards away to the nearest restroom. As I am in the restroom, I distinctively hear the sound of boots clapping on the tile floor of the hallway that leads to this restroom, among other rooms in that wing. As the sound gets closer to the restroom, I can hear the large Folger keys that are clinking together on their waist as they walk. When it sounded like they were right outside the door, I called out saying, "I will be out in a minute." And I didn't hear the sounds after I said that. Thinking someone was waiting outside, I hurried up and washed my hands, not taking more than a few minutes. I opened the door, and there was no one there. The hallway is long enough and has 3 entry doors that I would have heard open and close, as well as any other door in the hallway, to where they would have had issues getting out of the hallway noiselessly in the time between me calling to them and leaving the restroom. I returned to my post and asked my sergeant if he saw anyone go into the wing while I was down there. He said he didn't, and asked why. Knowing that he was someone who believed in ghosts, given that he and I had talked about how he used to do independent paranormal investigations, I told him what happened. His face went slack, and his eyes got large as he said, "Go check the video." I returned to my position and watched the video of that hallway of the wing above that one, and the areas outside the wing. No one was in that area during that time, except for me, and no signs of distortion. 5th experience. I had been an officer for about 6 years and was working my regular shift. I was watching the medication lines after the dinner lines were done, and my sergeant was talking with me. Not like a management thing, we were friends and just wanted to have a conversation while ensuring that prisoners weren't passing meds, fighting, or worse. The medical hallway I was watching is connected at one end to the rotunda and at the other end to one of the main housing blocks. specifically, right next to our main segregation unit. As we were talking, we heard what sounded like muffled talking from a radio. Checking our radio, we realized that it was not us. We began searching the area around us. Given the location, there shouldn't be an unattended radio, so it was a security issue and of some concern. As we proceeded to search the area, we realized that the intercom system speaker for the segregation unit was making the sounds. This intercom, unlike a standard housing unit, is not used frequently, which is why we were surprised to find it transmitting sound. The sergeant points at it and says, "It must be broken. Switch is in the off position, and the activation light is off." I looked closely and got goosebumps as I made a shocking discovery saying, "Sarge, how is it doing that when it's not plugged in?" I held up the unplugged cord leading out of the intercom box and gave it a slight tug to show it was attached directly to the box. The sergeant's face went white and he walked off shaking his head saying, "Nope, nope, nope. These intercoms don't have backup batteries and there are no direct power hookups. Just the cord that I had already shown was disconnected." The sounds continued for the duration of the medication lines. I left the area after that, and I never heard of it doing that again. End note, that's everything I experienced, but if you guys would like to hear some of the other stories I have heard, just let me know, and I'll type those up too.